get up. And on the way up, we're going to bite a kneecap off, all right? And we're going to stand up, and then it's going to take 2 more shots to knock us down, all right? And on the way up, we're going to take your other kneecap, and we're going to get up, and then it's going to take 3 shots to get us down.
And welcome aboard, Kneecaps Nation. It is time for another episode of Kneecaps for Breakfast. Vince Progard, that's me. Happy to be joined, as always, by the man across the way, Phil Byrne. And Phil, we finally have some organic Lions content to discuss, not having to scrap and claw our way looking for topics in the bowels of the offseason.
Yeah. You know, it's one of those things. You have the draft, and then you know that schedule's coming around sometimes. And of course, they announced it during the draft and when we would get the schedule. We've got the schedule. It's time to talk schedule because there are quite a few things to talk on the Lions schedule for 2024.
And I'm a little proud of myself because I was able to successfully stay in the social media or internet bubble over the course of the week when things were getting leaked out. It seemed like by the minute, and I'm sure the entire Lions schedule was probably out, I'd say a good 6 to 8 hours before the TV special actually aired, but I had no part in any of that stuff, and I missed the special, actually, from doing this and doing that the TV special just slipped right by me. So after going for a walk with my wife and Perry, we decided to, you know what? Let's just open up our phones and just run through the schedule, rip the Band-Aid off, and I'm like, oh. It's just that's an experience doing it that way. But yeah, it's tough, Phil, because we knew who they were going to play. That was no longer a mystery once the final game of the regular season went final. So we knew what we were in for. But the combination of games is what kind of threw me for a little bit of a loop here. So what do you kind of want to do, Phil? Do you want to go through the entire schedule start to finish, or just kind of break them up into, chunks or something, and then just sort of give our impressions, or how you looking to attack this?
Yeah. Well, I think it'd be best served. Let's go kind of month by month, and we'll kind of break down that month, and then we'll kind of give a recap of where that full season stands. In perpetuity, I guess.
So let's do that. So we're not going to do any predictions. We usually like to hold off until closer to the season once we have a better sense of how training camp went and if there's any last-minute acquisitions that take place or anything like that. There is a lot of off-season still left to go to where our opinions may change, so we don't want to lock in on that's a win, that's a loss, anything like that. But there's still a lot to unwrap and discuss as far as just what's right in front of us with the schedule. So I like your idea, Phil. We'll go month by month here. So we will start off the 7th day of September. It seems like that's a little bit earlier of a start to the schedule this year, but I guess that's right on cue with usual. Sunday, September 7th. 4:25 p.m. on CBS. Kind of interesting that a couple of NFC squads get the CBS Hello Friends game, but it is America's game of the week. Lions go on the road week 1 to take on the Green Bay Packers. So no rest for the weary. Boom, big game right off the jump. Second game, Sunday, September 14th. First home game of the season, 1 o'clock on Fox against the Chicago Bears. Ben Johnson and his new team coming to Ford Field for their first road game. Game number 3, Monday Night Football, September 22nd at Baltimore. And rounding out the month of September, home game, 1 o'clock on Fox on Sunday, September 28th against the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, that's kind of the first month, on how things look. And to me, I think the thing that's a little bit surprising is you knew the Lions were going to be in prime time. And again, we'll get through the whole schedule and kind of let you know those primetime games. But the fact that they're not starting the season in prime time, and then the 2 home games that they get, Chicago and Cleveland, are not 4 p.m. games. They're not primetime games. They're 1 p.m. games. So I kind of figured Ben Johnson and the Chicago Bears, that first visit into Ford Field this year, would be a primetime or even a 4:05 game.
Yeah,
Not the case. It's a 1 o'clock game, but kind of unique. You got two NFC North teams right off the gate to get things started in 2025.
absolutely. So getting to October. So Sunday, October 5th, 425 on Fox, America's Game of the Week for another appearance for the Lions at the Bengals. Following week, Sunday, October 12th, at the Kansas City Chiefs on Sunday Night Football. Following week is week 7, Monday Night Football, October 20th, at home against the Buccaneers. And a week 8 bye week to close out the month of October. So, Phil, at least there's no end of September bye week. At least we get a whole nother month under our
Yeah.
belts before we get a bye week to deal with. But at Cincinnati on America's Game of the Week with everybody watching, at Kansas City on Sunday Night Football,
Yeah.
Buccaneers at home on Monday Night Football. If there was ever a rubber meet road situation for this Lions team where you're going to have millions upon millions of fans tuned in for these 3 games, that's do or die time.
Well, over the course of a 4-game stretch, you do have the Cleveland Browns thrown in there, but it's on the road, basically at Baltimore, Cleveland at home, Cincinnati, and Kansas City. So we knew who these opponents were going to be. You probably, as a Lions fan, don't want to see a combination of having to play those 3 teams over the course of basically 4 weeks with the Cleveland Browns sprinkled in. That is very, very daunting. One thing I just noticed, as I also have the schedule pulled up, this impacts me as a Detroit Lions season ticket holder. That Monday Night Football game, guess what? It must be one of those double dips because that game starts at 7 o'clock.
That's
So,
exactly right.
no worry, Detroit. I know we don't have Detroit. We don't have public transportation. You just got to fight through the crowds of maybe doing a half day of work or something like that. Get out of work a little bit earlier. Get downtown because that place will be rocking for the Bucks for Monday Night Football. But a 7 p.m. start for that game.
That's what the PTO's for, right? Get a half a day of that and get out early because you're gonna need that extra time. Trust me.
Yep.
This has been your Detroit traffic report. Yeah, whatever. To the month of November we go, Mr. Phil Byrne. The second day of November, week 9. Lions return home after their bye week. They stay at home because they played Tampa Bay and then went on their bye week. So they stay at home. 1 o'clock game on Fox against the Minnesota Vikings. First time they've played the Vikings since the 2024 regular season ended. Week 10, Sunday, November 9th, 425 on Fox, back on America's Game of the Week at the Commanders in the ever-anticipated rematch of the playoff game in which the Commanders prevailed over the Lions and ended the Lions season abruptly. Very next week, Sunday, November 16th, Sunday Night Football at Philadelphia. Week 12, Sunday, November 23rd, back at home, 1 o'clock game on Fox against the New York Giants, which leads into the final game of November, Week 13, the Thanksgiving affair, 1 o'clock game on Fox, home against the Green Bay Packers. So Vikings at home, at the Commanders, at the Eagles, home game against the Giants, home game against the Packers on Thanksgiving.
A little surprising to me, I guess, when you look at this stretch of games. Of course, you do have the bye week separating, October and November there, and getting into this stretch of games into November. But again, we're going to have 3 straight seasons of having an NFC North team be our Thanksgiving Day opponent. Make no mistake about it. You're going to remember it. We lost to the Packers last time out on Thanksgiving at home, so that was not a great feeling.
It didn't look pretty either.
No, the Packers were damn good that day. They had our number. Jordan Love looked like he was a all-world kind of quarterback that day, but there they are again. They are our Thanksgiving Day opponent.
Which leads us to December, the home stretch, week 14. Thursday night football headed our way, so we don't have to worry about getting the short turnaround once again. It's going to be a full week of rest as the Dallas Cowboys come to town for a game that you can see on Amazon Prime Video, Cowboys and Lions on Thursday night. Week 15, the Lions get their anticipated mini bye, if you will. They get 10 days in between games. December 14th, they go on the road to take on the LA Rams, 425, America's Game of the Week on Fox. Week 16, the Lions return home for their final home game of the regular season. That is December 21st, 425, America's Game of the Week on CBS as the Pittsburgh Steelers come to town. Not sure what that matchup's going to look like because we still don't know who their quarterback is going to be heading into this season, because as of right now, Mason Rudolph is really the only guy that's in line to take any reps. Week 17, short week. Lions travel to the Minnesota Vikings. What's significant about that game? That will take place on Christmas Day at 4:30 in the afternoon. So just as Christmas dinner is getting served, you're going to have the Lions taking on the Vikings from Minneapolis on in the background. That game will be seen on Netflix. And rounding things off to end the regular season, we don't know what day the game will actually take place or the TV network because that's all flexed 6 days ahead of time. Week 18, the first weekend of January, the Lions finish off the regular season on the road in the division at the Chicago Bears. So to recap the final month of the season, Phil, home game against the Cowboys on Thursday Night Football, at the Rams, home against the Steelers, at the Vikings on Christmas Day, wrap things up at the Bears to end the regular season. Woo-wee.
Woo-wee indeed.
Your thoughts on the final month of the season? What do you see that sticks out to you?
Yeah, you do have some of these days in which they're played going to be spread out to give you a little bit more rest, but pretty unique. Haven't seen this in a while where the Lions are going to be on the road in back-to-back games, back-to-back in division on the road, no less. That's going to be a little bit daunting. You knew that you had one more Bears game on the agenda, so they are going to be ending things with the Bears. We've ended things with either the Packers or the Vikings in recent years, so that'll be something new. But
it's been quite a while since they ended the season against the Bears. A long time.
It has been. It has been. I have some general thoughts on the schedule, if you want to go off into that direction. But yeah, I guess just to wrap things up on the month of December, you're playing the Cowboys, the Steelers, and the Bears, three of maybe the biggest fan bases in the NFL to close things out. So it does let me know that they are expecting the Lions to probably be in contention for something, a playoff berth, the NFC North berth, because they want the Lions to generate some of the buzz that could come with some of these teams. Those teams haven't really been overly great here in recent memory. So I think they're going to be using the Lions as kind of the buzzier of the two teams heading into some of those matchups.
Exactly. So I'm just going to just rapid fire really, really quick through the schedule, and you can take all the time you need. So starting with week 1, at Green Bay, Chicago at home, at the Ravens on Monday Night Football, Browns at home, at the Bengals, at the Chiefs on Sunday Night Football, home against the Buccaneers on Monday Night Football, bye week, Vikings at home, at the Commanders, at the Eagles on Sunday Night Football, Giants at home, Packers at home on Thanksgiving, Cowboys at home on Thursday Night Prime Video, at the Rams, Steelers at home, at the Vikings on Christmas Day, wrapping things up against the Bears. So, Phil, now that we have the entire schedule laid out in front of us, I'm not asking you to go, oh, they're going to finish with X record, but when you saw this schedule for the first time, what were your initial thoughts, and how have they evolved or changed if at all, since then.
Okay, so I think the Lions have done an awesome job over the last couple of years of winning the NFC North by taking care of business against NFC North opponents. Last season, we had the benefit of playing a lot of those teams towards the end of the season. The Vikings game was on the road was the first one that we had. I think it was like week 6. So a little
Right
bit of
after Hutch
uncharted
got
territory.
hurt.
A little bit of uncharted territory this season, starting with 2 in division, and then basically ending with 2 in division, and then basically you get everything else thrown in between. I also think it's really quite interesting that basically you're going to go on stretches of playing teams from the AFC, beginning in week 3 to week 6. And then you go through the NFC East, I should say, weeks 10 through 12. So this isn't like baseball or basketball or hockey where you're going to have your West Coast road trip or anything like that. That's not how these teams operate. I mean, you have a game on Sunday. You're probably going to be by Friday, where you're going to be playing. You get a rest day a little bit, you get some more practice, and then you're basically back out after the game. So they're not in these towns that often. So it's just really, really unique seeing this schedule put out this way. And then I think the other thing that I also want to say, it's kind of cool that they're going to be a Netflix game in there. I know you're probably either for it or you're against it for a Christmas Day game. But by 4:30, usually my family's Christmases, there's not much else to do, quite frankly. It's not like this game's going to be at noon or 1 p.m. or something. So I'm all for it. But a lot of times you're going to have to set a reminder, see an ad, see a promo of something to be like, hey, when are we playing again? And what channel is this on? Because we're all over the place. Yes, we do have some 1 p.m. games sprinkled in there, but the network and the times and even the days of these games are going to be all over the place this season.
It seems to me that if you have things that you like to do on Sundays, you're going to be given that opportunity because
Yeah.
you only have 4 1 o'clock Sunday kickoffs the entire season. So if that's not the epitome of respect from the NFL, I'm not exactly sure what else is. It's like the old days. Remember when they would go wire to wire, being 1 o'clock on Fox, getting the F or G crew from Fox doing the game, and
Good old
now,
Ron Pitts game.
yeah, Chris
No offense to
Myers,
Ron Pitts, but
yeah, exactly. And now I'm counting more 425 America's Game of the Week games than I have ever seen on a schedule for. So you had better get used to Kevin Burkhardt or Jim Nance
Yeah.
because we're going to be hearing a lot of their voice over the course of the 2025 season.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the Lions, they have a lot of players that, um, were up for discussion for Pro Bowl, for All Pro that are well known. You'd like to get a couple more of those guys defensively into that category, into that boot as well. But there's no shortage of players to be able to market these matchups for on the Lions. I think Dan Campbell ultimately is the most marketable of them all. Like he is the brand name with the Lions. So, it is a sign of respect, but also how much juice are these guys going to have in the tank? Some of these matchups, the Eagles and Commanders on the road in back-to-back weeks. We talked about the 3 of 4 doing that AFC gauntlet where, you got the Browns sprinkled in there with that home game, but going on the road to Cincy, to Baltimore, to Kansas City, this is not easy. We knew when the schedules and the opponents came out that this was how it was going to be constructed. We just didn't know this was going to be the flow. This is going to be the rundown essentially. But it's going to be interesting. Again, we're not calling predictions today. I think there's still a lot of offseason to take place. We got to get to training camp and things like that. So we will have a show for something like that down the road. But first glance is they're getting respect, but it ain't going to be easy.
Well, that's what I was wanting to get into, though, without making predictions. Do you think that the league did them any favors, or do you think that they kind of screwed them a little bit? Do you think they are set up for success with what you see out in front, or do you think they're going to have to really be up against it and work even harder for it than they would normally?
Potentially, but I would say this team, look at their track record on the road. They've been a better team on the road than they have been at home. Yeah, you want to see that continue. Yeah, there's been some roster turnover and things like that. But what I like about some of these matchups and playing non traditional times is some of these road games that you're going to be going into down the stretch, you get a 10-day break. You get a Christmas day, and then, you're not turning around and having that Sunday following it. So, as a Lions fan, I think the key thing to look out for is not necessarily the location. You would love it to be at Ford Field, of course. But how many days off and getting guys healthy and rested is truly going to be key. And then just remember, we've said it a number of times here. Lee McNeil probably out till November or something like that. So you think maybe the team from a defensive line standpoint will be healthier and at full swing that second half of the season, that gauntlet. I think it is a little harder up front, the schedule, than I think
Yeah.
on the back nine. So that's kind of my 2 cents on it as well.
And as we talked about on our last episode, the numbers really aren't good from a odds standpoint of if you drop your first 2 games or you drop, let's say, 3 out of your first 4, the odds of you coming back to make the playoffs are very, very, very small in the grand scheme of things. So even if they kind of fall on their face in that first 5-6 weeks and then they really kick it into high gear, that's almost, if anything, setting you up for about 3 years ago when they had to go on the road and win at Green Bay and hope for some help, and the help they didn't wind up getting because they were so far deep in the hole starting off 1-6 that season that they had to almost be perfect. And even that in itself is difficult to do. And then factor in that you need to get help on the back end from somebody else. It's almost like, you know what? You hope for a little bit of a flip flop, maybe a little easier up front, and then afford yourself some margin for error down the stretch. And I just don't see that with the way this schedule lines up.
Well, if you recall, I mean, think about the Cincinnati Bengals of last year. They started off so poorly. They looked to be so out of rhythm. Joe Burrow could not get on target with any of his receivers. By the time he got to about week 10, no one wanted to play that team. They were the hottest team in the NFL, but they were so far behind when it came to the standings that even if they won, it would make a little bit of a dent in the AFC North race. But the playoffs at large, the AFC being the conference or the division that it was, like they still weren't going to be, in the running for too much else, just with the losses that they picked up, on the front side of the schedule.
Interesting fact that I picked up on once the schedule was released. So we knew who the opponents were going to be and where the games were going to take place. So again, that was no mystery, but the way this schedule sits, the Lions have 7 outdoor games this season. So 7 out of their 9 road games will take place outdoors, a sharp contrast to what we saw a season ago. And of the 9 road opponents for the Lions, 7 of those made the playoffs a season ago. So that makes, when you factor in what these teams did last year, and again, that only means so much, but just for discussion's sake here, if you factor all that in, that gives the Lions a 667 opposing win percentage on the road, which is the toughest road game strength of schedule for an entire season in the Super Bowl era. So no team has had a tougher road schedule over the course of an entire season from the start of the season on as this year's Detroit Lions have. So it almost makes you think, Phil, if they even surpass those odds that we talked about last week, over under 10.5, juice to the under, so that still, well, let's say, puts them at 10-7. In order to do that, you have to steal some difficult road games in order for that to come to pass, just for them to do exactly what Vegas says. So you could almost argue that if the Lions go out there and exceed expectations, that's one of the most accomplished teams that we've seen in a long time, just because of what their road looked like and who they had to beat along the way.
Yeah, this is not going to be a cakewalk. I think it is pretty interesting. But you brought up what Vegas thought, 10.5 being what the over under win total was for this team before we even had the schedule release, knowing who the opponents would be, knowing where those games would take place. We just didn't know where it would fall, in between. And this is a team that lost 2 games in the regular season last year. Right? That is an incredible stat. That is Vegas saying this team's got a tough road. But here's the thing about this team and the way that this team has been assembled. If they can get through this and get to the postseason, whether it's at Ford Field or on the road, the path that they're going to take to get into that spot potentially, again, we're not doing season breakdown, win loss, or anything like that. I think that's going to be like almost a 180 from last year, being the top seed, having it at home. Yeah, it was still a challenging schedule, with what the NFC North ended up being, but I think they're going to feel a lot more propelled, a lot more motivated to take care of business if they get into that spot again, just because the road to get there is going to be so daunting.
So some subtle favors that I picked up on that may not jump off the page, because you look at the schedule top to bottom and it's almost like you got your head in your hands as a Lions fan thinking, how the hell are we going to do this? But if you just kind
Yeah.
of look at it from a different perspective and look for some subtle favors that we may have received. So, okay. Lions are at Green Bay week 1. They're at Kansas City week 6. What's unique about those two destinations? It can get awfully cold in both of those two destinations in the back end of the season. Kansas City is kind of
Yeah.
deceiving because of the way their latitude is set up, but it can get awfully cold there in America's heartland. So you get the Packers out of the way week 1, you get the Chiefs out of the way week 6, you get the Commanders and the Eagles both in the early half of November, to where it doesn't get unbelievably cold just yet. It could still be, maybe 30s or 40s, but you're probably not talking teens or 20s in either of
Right.
those destinations at that point on the calendar. So that means that the only game that the Lions really need to be concerned about from a cold weather and elements standpoint is going to be that final game against the Bears. But we didn't know the way that was going to shake out because of those 7 games that were going to be on the road, outdoors. We didn't know that it could have backloaded the Lions schedule with those destinations in late November and December. So it looks like the majority of those cold weather destination games, the Lions are getting out of the way before the middle half of November. So you could look at that as a subtle favor if you view it that way. And then another one that I see is the Lions really only have one extended road game, in that from a distance traveled standpoint, and that's to the West Coast against the Rams. And they're actually getting that coming off the extra rest from the Thursday night football game. So that means they could even find a way to have a typical week of rest and then get out to the West Coast a little earlier if they wanted to maybe acclimate and get used to their surroundings, maybe use the extra time to their advantage a little bit. The Lions are only traveling a combined about 11,000 miles, which ranks at the bottom third of the NFL as far as distance traveled over the course of the season. So even though they have 9 road games, they're going to be going on the road a lot. They're not looking at very long road trips from a distance standpoint, a lot of which will be a very, very quick flight or even a bus ride, depending on how they decide to transport themselves. And that also makes it easier for Lions fans to be able to get to these destinations, because you're probably talking
Yeah.
an 8-hour drive or less for the majority of these.
Well, and what's interesting about that is the Lions have kind of um, moved on the Lions road game experience too, with ticket prices being what they are. I think there were 4 cities that they now have on. You can find this on the Lions website. What they're calling takeovers. I think it's like a Kansas City takeover. A Los Angeles takeover. Where they're basically going to be able to provide a ticket and probably some preferred accommodations or something like that. Maybe a tailgate scenario or situation as well, kind of sprinkled in. But smart of the Lions to know because as a season ticket holder and seeing these, and again, it isn't necessarily inflation. It's the cost of supply and demand, and just knowing that there's only so many of these tickets out there. So, smart of them to kind of move on the away game experience.
Yep, absolutely. And just so we can say that we discussed it, the preseason schedule has
Oh,
also
there we go.
been released. I know you've been waiting long and hard for it, Phil, so here you go. We talked about it a couple of weeks ago. The Lions will be on the Hall of Fame game Thursday, July 31st. They will play the LA Chargers, 8 o'clock on NBC. The official week one of the preseason, the Lions will travel to take on the Falcons. Week two, the Lions will play at Ford Field against the Dolphins. And week three, preseason, the Lions will play at home against the Houston Texans, which kind of tough to really get too far deep into because we know that the Lions tend to not do a whole lot of playing of anybody of serious consequence in the preseason, but based on the depth that we saw on display last season because of the injuries, we'll probably wind up seeing a handful of players, particularly on defense, that we recognize from a season ago.
Well, what's also strange to me is bring back the game with the Cleveland Browns in the preseason for that completely meaningless trophy of was it the Edmund Fitzgerald or something like
Something
that?
like that.
What happened to that? We used to play Buffalo too,
Every year.
just about every season. So that's also gone by
Because
the
they used to make it
wayside.
to where
So
it was pretty much advantageous for both teams from a travel
yeah,
standpoint. So that way you were always playing Buffalo, you're always playing Cleveland. Indianapolis was a pretty frequent flyer of the Lions preseason schedule. So teams that you don't play very often, so that way you're not worried about tipping plays or secrets or anything like that. But at the same
yeah.
time, it's not really difficult from a travel standpoint. Now it seems like you're just spinning the wheel, and it could
The
be an NFC
Dolphins and
team. It could
yeah,
be the Dolphins or the I don't think I've ever seen us play the Dolphins or the
no,
Texans in the preseason before. So where's this all coming from?
I don't know. I don't know. All I know is we don't live anywhere near Miami or Houston, so there's that.
And you could argue, oh, hey, Miami's got to travel a good distance for it's a preseason game. Who cares? I don't care if the Lions go out there and win 50-0. I mean, if they're still going to be up against it, looking at week one at the Packers, it's like, who cares what they do in the preseason?
Maybe Stephen Ross is doing something, out at U of M that week, and he called up the higher powers that be of the NFL scheduling office. It's like, get me to Detroit. Got stuff going on, so I don't know.
I
We're
mean,
just
Stephen
speculating
Ross
here,
is
but
a pretty prominent University of Michigan
yeah.
graduate, so maybe he has some business up in Ann Arbor in the middle part of August. I don't. Maybe he's in charge of who knows? Who knows? It's
But
all.
if you would have asked me for my take on who would be playing in the preseason, the Texans and the Dolphins. So what? There's 31 other teams. They probably would not have been in the top 27 of the teams that I think we would be playing. Let's put it that way.
Will Matt Schaub be taking some reps at quarterback for the Houston Texans? Is he still their backup? Nope.
Hey, better
Nope.
him than Deshaun Watson. So
We may
yeah,
we may see him on the sidelines at least when the Browns come to town in week 4. Will we have Shadur Sanders as the starting quarterback by week 4? That's at least adds some sex
yeah,
appeal to a random 1 o'clock on a September Sunday game.
yeah, yeah. Could be, could
Ugh.
be.
All right, Phil. So we don't want to reinvent the wheel too much here with this
No.
whole schedule layout, but there it is. That's the schedule that we're going to be going with, and that's going to be our guiding light from now until we sign off for the season in January
So
of next year.
let me throw it back to you. So I have season tickets, so I can kind of choose which game I want to go to. You see this schedule laid out, and if you're going to select one home game, Vince, which is the home game that you would like to go to, and what do you think is going to be the spicy reason behind that? Like why would you choose that game over the other games?
You know what? I think the Lions and the Buccaneers is starting to become a thing again. Remember how they were
Mhm.
divisional rivals all those years back, and then things kind of got stale? Now we're seeing the Buccaneers almost every year based on the way the schedule's gone, based on the playoff appearance from a couple years ago. It's at
Yeah.
Ford Field. It's on Monday Night Football. You know the environment on Monday Night Football when it's at Ford Field is just off the charts crazy. So that would be a great environment to be a part of. You got Baker Mayfield coming to town. He's got great receivers. It'd be a good test for the Lions defense. And again, they're coming off a gauntlet of AFC teams. So I'm curious to see how they would look going into their bye week. You know what? If I had to pick a home game to go to, that'd probably be the one.
I like it. I like it. I think the easy choice would have been an NFC North team. So you're going to go with an NFC Central team instead, calling it back to the 90s when they were part of the division there. But yeah, you're right.
Hey, as long as Warren Sapp isn't come out of that locker room to put Jared Goff into a body bag, I think we're okay.
Yeah, no, I agree.
All right,
we are going to. That should be a fun game.
We're going to finish this episode of Kneecaps for Breakfast with a Warren Sapp reference. We appreciate you joining us to break down the Lions schedule. More recap of the Lions schedule as well as a look ahead to the second leg of the offseason to come on our next episode of Kneecaps for Breakfast. We can't wait to have you on board for that. For Phil Byrne across the way, Vince Progar saying good morning, go Lions, forward down the field, over and out.